The advice and opinions expressed by the host of Autism Live and her guests are meant solely as suggestion and should not be in any way construed as child-specific advice. The Center for Autism and Related Disorders advises working with a board-certified behavior analyst who has experience with autism before starting any intensive behavioral intervention. Any choices you make in determining your child's treatment are completely at your own discretion.
Welcome to Autism Live, broadcasting from here at the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. My name is Dr. Jonathan Tarbox, and I am sitting in today for Shannon Penrod, the usual host of Autism Live. I'm the Director of Research and Development here at the Center for Autism and Related Disorders, and today it's my special treat to sit in for Shannon Penrod and host Ask Dr. Doreen, our weekly talk show where we give the audience the opportunity to write in with specific questions for Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh, our fearless leader, the founder of CARD and executive director of CARD. Dr. Granpeesheh is an accomplished researcher and clinician in the field of autism treatment, has been treating kids on the spectrum for many decades, and is generally mobbed at conferences. She presents at many parent conferences every year, and after every talk that she gives, she's usually mobbed by about 200 parents asking questions and desperate for information. And so this show is kind of a special treat because we give the audience the opportunity to write in with their specific questions and get a little bit of insight from Dr. Granpeesheh. So, with that, Doreen, we'll go ahead and get started.
Well, good morning, first of all. It's nice to have the opportunity to spend an hour with you, Jonathan, and I'm sorry that Shannon's not feeling well. We'd love to jump into the questions. Maybe they want to start with the reel of Ask Dr. Doreen first. I'm not sure if Emily wants to do that, and then we can get into the questions.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh is the...
Dr. Doreen is an expert in autism.
Doreen Granpeesheh.
Dr. Granpeesheh.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh.
Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh is a visionary in the field of autism, and now you get to ask her questions on Ask Dr. Doreen.
All right, so we're here in the Dr. Doreen Granpeesheh Ask Dr. Doreen segment here on Autism Live, and we're going to go ahead and get into the questions.
Sounds great.
From our viewers. So, Dr. Doreen, Eileen writes in asking, will echolalia decrease? I have a 5-year-old child, a boy on the spectrum, and he can also get very aggressive and hit himself out of frustration. So it looks like we're talking about echolalia, aggression, and self-injurious behaviors.
So actually, I love the fact that you and I get to chat about echolalia a little bit. But in terms of the getting frustrated and hitting himself, obviously that's most of the behaviors that our kids show, especially the aggressive behaviors, have to do with just frustration and not being able to express themselves. Most likely, if he could communicate, he'd be saying something like, I don't want to do this or whatever. And some of the children tend to aggress towards themselves because that becomes something that really gains the attention of everyone around them, and people tend to panic or freak out when they see a child doing that. So for those types of behaviors, obviously, it's always better to try to teach some form of communication. We find that if we can get our children on some form of communication device, if they're nonverbal, even an augmentative device, or nowadays the iPad, it just starts to dissipate. The aggressive behavior starts to go down because, as you always say, if it's easier for them to communicate using the iPad, then they'll stop doing those other types of behaviors. Now, in terms of echolalia, it's interesting because I don't think from a behavioral perspective or any real area we know much about echolalia. I guess historically I would have to say we were always excited when a child would develop echolalia because it would be one of the first signs that we can develop speech. So
at least they're making some sound, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
And in fact, with some kids in the old days, I remember we used to reinforce the echolalia, just whatever it was, in order to be able to increase the production of sound before we tried to gain control over the echolalia and form it. So echolalia not only shows that the child can hear, but it more significantly shows that the child is imitating, and imitation is one of the very key precursors to all other skill development. So it's not a bad sign. However, it does have to come under control at some point. We call it SD control, or in other words, the child has to learn to control their imitation of sound so that it's functional and not just, let's say, self-stimulatory or repetitive and meaningless. And so a behavior analyst can start to try to form that by allowing the child to imitate things that would then be tagged into like labels or objects or actions or activities that the child wants to interact in, and not allowing the more repetitive forms of echolalia. So I don't know that to answer the question whether it will decrease. I think in general most of the self-stimulatory behaviors tend to change and possibly decrease as the child gets older. Have you found that too, Jonathan?
Well, certainly, yeah. It's been my observation, and I'm not sure actually how much research there is on this, but it's been my observation that as the kids gain more skills in their therapy programs, and as they progress and basically just have more stuff to do with their time, they have so many different other things they could be doing that stereotypy or repetitive behavior sort of almost becomes less valuable just because there's just so many other things they can do.
Yeah, absolutely.
But one thing I see all the time that really frustrates a lot of parents and teachers is that when the kid has a lot of downtime, quite honestly, when the kid's bored, the child might start to resort to echolalia or scripting videos or that kind of stuff. And it's kind of like, well, the kid should know that he's not supposed to do that, right? Like when we're in church or when we're waiting in line at the bank or when we're sitting in class, we should be listening to the teacher, right? We shouldn't be reciting our favorite video script. But let's think about the function, right? If the kid's kind of bored and doesn't really have much else to do right then, what would you and I do? We'd probably space out and daydream, right?
Right.
And maybe he's not so good at that or hasn't learned how to do that yet, so it kind of makes sense that he's going to say things out loud to entertain himself.
Absolutely. And I think that's a really good point because, we all daydream, and really the only difference is that you're thinking versus saying.
Right.
And a lot of our kids don't really know the difference of how to do that. I could, theoretically you could take this back into the whole theory of mind thing, and the kids are not aware of. This is also why they're not embarrassed by it, and parents are embarrassed if the child's echolalic, let's say in a church setting or something, and the child's completely unaware of the fact that everybody else is listening or looking. And that goes back to the lack of theory of mind, not being aware of the fact that other people are trying to pay attention to the sermon or whatever else is going on.
And doesn't that happen too with typically developing children, just at a younger age, right? Before they learn how to conceal things or lie, they'll say lies out loud, or they'll say what they're thinking out loud, right?
That's
Even though that's not going to work because,
Right, absolutely. And it's just a matter of, in typical development, I think we become very much aware of other people's reactions around age 4 or something. And that is when the, beginning areas of theory of mind start to develop as well. And with our kids, sometimes that just doesn't happen unless they're taught to become aware. From I guess you could also look at echolalia from a sensory perspective, that sometimes when you have kids that do play with sound, some of my kids also will even press their ear in and out as they're doing it, and I think it's just a kind of playing with sound and what they hear type thing. And it's, the definition, obviously, it falls under the stereotypic repetitive behaviors that don't have a significant adaptive function of any type. So I guess, it is important to try to control it, gain control over it, replace it, as you said. And it's a good perspective. I always learn things from you. I like that. It's a good perspective to remember that the child's trying to engage himself and measure. For this parent, it would be important to measure and see if the child does more echolalia when they're unengaged, bored, versus when they are actually busy with something. And so that would prove that the function is possibly just trying to engage himself or herself, and then you really want to try to keep the child busy with something more adaptive.
Mm-hmm. And it would be a tough thing to directly measure, but I'm really interested in even creating treatments or lesson plans where we intentionally prompt the kid to engage in their stereotypy, but just in their head, quote unquote. So, all right, dude, it's not appropriate to talk about this stuff out loud, but how about just thinking about it?
Right.
That's what you and I would do.
Actually, we have a lesson in the cognitive curriculum called Think versus Say, and it does focus on that aspect of when you can think something in your head. And I just think for our kids, it's a very abstract concept, and it's really hard for them when they're young to understand that concept, because we do all have a voice in our heads, and it's just difficult to differentiate.
Right.
Yeah.
And one thing that I always have to emphasize is the importance of practice. So in typical development, I'm guessing that typically developing kids maybe get punished once or twice for saying something out loud that they shouldn't have, that they should just be thinking, like they tell off their teacher or their parent or something.
That's so true.
And then just from one or two punishments, they figure out, I better just think that, right?
No, that's
Whereas
right.
our kids might require a lot of learning opportunities. And I'm not saying we should punish them, but we might need lots and lots of practice of, look, here's what it looks like to say it out loud. Here's what it looks like to think. Which one works better? Now try it again and again and again.
Exactly. And again, it goes to, with typically developing kids, the punishment often is that embarrassment, and that takes a certain level of awareness that, I stand out, everybody's laughing at me. And a lot of times our kids don't necessarily even identify those factors, because they're not seeing the rest of the world as separate from themselves. They're very much into their own world. And so there is no punishment per se when they do say something that shouldn't be said or should be thought.
Right.
Yeah,
That's interesting.
That's why I love that whole area of research that you guys are heavily involved with, which is kind of secrets and telling lies and learning what the difference is and how to do that.
Yeah, we're actually designing a study right now on teaching kids to play tricks on other kids or on family members. Friendly pranks, not mean ones, but just how it requires the ability to think about what the other person knows and plan your trick so that they don't know what you don't want them to know, and you can't give it away and all that stuff. And it's based, of course, on the deception lesson in the skills curriculum. So
yeah, that's right.
That's fun stuff. We're just about to get that off the ground. So.
That's great.
Yeah,
that's great.
Neat. All right, should we move on to the next question?
Yeah, sure. I hope we helped that family a little bit.
And if not, we've at least had fun talking about interesting topics.
And I also do want to say, Shannon usually reminds me to say this, that, we do try very hard to answer the questions as well as we can, but there's no way that we could or would want to answer very specifically, because we don't know much about the children that people are writing in about, and we wouldn't want to give advice where it doesn't really pertain. And it's important to keep in mind that a lot of our answers are just more general and theoretical rather than pertaining specifically to your child.
Right. Sort of things that we've seen work overall, but not necessarily for any individual child. And also, we should remind you, viewers, if you write in a question and we address it, but perhaps we didn't really quite hit the nail on the head, go ahead and send a follow-up question or ask for clarification, and we'll be happy to get to it on a future show. All right, let's see. Next question from a viewer named Teresa. How close are they to finding out how autism is caused? Boy, that's a big question.
That's a great question. Well, there's a lot of different groups that are doing research on looking at potential causes, but here are some of the problems that come in the way in terms of conducting research, and you can elaborate on this, of course. When there are a million different factors, which there are in this case with autism, it's very hard to determine which one is actually causing various symptoms versus which factors are just correlated with the symptoms of autism. Now, with autism, we have a series of symptoms that have to do with just communication and, let's say, language delay. And then we have a series of symptoms that have to do with these social delays that we were just talking about, kind of not understanding other people's minds, not being able to, see people as separate from yourself, even basic social delays like eye contact and so on. And then there's the presence of those stereotypical behaviors. So those three areas as symptoms of autism. And in terms of research on what causes all three of those, really some very, very few, I think 6 or so genes have been identified that correlate to some aspect of autism. And so ideally, the right way to express it would be to say that some genetic components have been traced that will lead to either a sort of a social delay or a repetitive stereotypical type of behavior or some aspect of autism. But the general scientific community believes that there's, in the spectrum of autism, there's at least 20 or 30 genes that would have to come together to interact and produce this type of symptomology. Not only that, but also that this whole gene pool would not necessarily be active on its own, and the belief is that some environmental trigger actually starts the process or produces those symptoms. And we've talked many times on this show before that there are too many environmental factors that could potentially come into play. With some children, it's pretty obvious that their delays were initiated after a certain period of growth. Like those are the kids that we call sort of regressive. And with those children, you see that they've grown, developed typically up to a certain point in life, and then they've lost language or they've lost social skills. And so with some of those children, theories have come up about what could be the environmental factor that caused it. Some people believe that it had something to do with the child's vaccinations. Others say that it could be just exposure to things in our food and so on that the children are not digesting properly. Toxins in general. A lot of our kids seem to not be able to detoxify fast enough from metals in the environment and other types of toxins. So however, given that the spectrum is so huge, you have children on one end that are completely nonverbal, totally unable to in any way communicate or socialize, and on the other end of the spectrum you have children who are very high functioning, are communicating, their language is almost normal, but they have social deficits that set them apart. So given that there's this huge spectrum and, there's all these environmental factors that could trigger a variety of genetic problems, it's virtually impossible to say one thing or another is causing the entire spectrum.
Yeah, it seems very unlikely that they're ever going to discover the one cause of autism, right? It's too complex of an issue.
It really is. And I actually don't even think that there is one single cause. And a lot of the research that we do here at CARD, as you know, through the reason that we're very much into our skills database, is that what we're hoping to do here is to generate enough information about a large number of children, both genetic, and that's why, of course, we're doing the research that we are with Lineagen. And so our hope is that once we have a lot of genetic information as well as kind of phenotypic information about the child's demographics and their learning curve and their problem behaviors and all this, their symptoms essentially, that we're hoping that with that we would be able to start finding clusters which could be called phenotypes or subtypes of autism. And I think that has to be a first step. As you find these phenotypes, then you're kind of looking at smaller groups of kids and that are very similar in symptomology to each other, and it's much more of a homogeneous group, and then you can perhaps start to develop ideas about what caused it in those children versus another group. And so that's kind of down in the future, and I think it'll be a while before we get there.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And, in the meantime, it seems like every maybe 6 months or so, a study comes out that's really exciting and is maybe one piece of the puzzle, but still nobody's really integrating it all together. Like, just recently, the study came out, I'm actually blanking on the author's name, but it was published, it was conducted here in the Valley, where they correlated diagnosis rates with how close you live to the freeways, the 101 and 405 freeway.
Right.
And they found that if the mother lived within a few blocks of one of these major freeways, some of the most busy freeways in the world, that they had a much higher probability of actually giving birth to a child on the spectrum.
Unbelievable.
And so, the assumption there is probably having to do with pollutants, right?
Yeah.
Air pollution from burning gasoline, so
or
mercury,
lead
other
or
things,
something like that.
Yeah.
And see, that's a great example I'm glad you brought that study up, because that just shows you the number of different things in the environment that could have a correlation. I mean, for any research group to now be able to go back and track not only the child's entire history and what they've been exposed to, but also what the mom has been exposed to, it's almost impossible to do that, and so it's extremely difficult. I think, and you and I have discussed this as well, there are, even right now, there are some genetic disorders that are very similar. They resemble autism, and it would be interesting to kind of carve them out. And I think a lot of people are not aware of the fact that so many different genetic syndromes are so similar in their symptomology, and it would be important to say, okay, well, this is genetically what's leading to, let's say, Angelman's or one of the others, and write about those and separate them out, and then start to look at what's left and how can we phenotype the rest. Back in 94, I guess, when they came out with the current diagnostic manual, DSM-4, the concept was, the idea or the hope was to start subdividing. But it was a very kind of, I think a lot of scientists had gotten together, and clinicians as well, and they had come up with ideas about, well, it looks like there's a group that's called, Asperger's, and perhaps there's that group called the regressive group, and they tried to call that the disintegrative disorder. And so there were all these different kind of sub-classifications, let's separate the higher functioning kids and call them PDD, NOS, and so on. And it didn't really work out very well, I think, because autism was already pretty much on the rise in 94, and so a lot of us who were doing diagnostic work back then, nobody really went back to re-diagnose their children as disintegrative disorder versus autism, especially because the fear was that by doing that we would be affecting the child's funding.
Right.
A lot of the funding agencies were not really recognizing, let's say, childhood disintegrative disorder. Most people haven't even heard of that. Yeah. And it is definitely one of the autism spectrum disorders. Now, with the new DSM coming out next month, and I think next week actually on this show I'll do a review of the new diagnostic criteria. But with the new DSM-5 coming out, they've kind of gone in the exact opposite direction, which is sort of interesting. They've taken away all the subclassifications, and we don't even have the subclassification Asperger's or PDD-NOS anymore, and now it's just going to be called autism spectrum disorder. And instead of trying to subdivide it that way, they're just trying to, I guess, classify it according to severity level and, kind of more of a qualitative basis rather than a quantitative differentiation. So we'll see how that works out.
Yeah, it's interesting.
Should be interesting.
Should be an adventure. All right, let's take a look at our next question. And actually, this isn't a question. This is just a piece of great news that a viewer, Linda, wrote in. And, one of the things that I love about Autism Live and about Shannon Penrod is she doesn't sugarcoat anything. It's the real honest truth. But at the same time, and she talks about a lot of really heavy topics that are really challenging and really emotionally difficult for people. But at the same time, there's just a feeling of positivity, right, in the show of Autism Live, where if you watch Autism Live, you come away away feeling a little bit better than you did when you started.
Absolutely.
Feeling a little bit stronger and a little bit more empowered. So I just love the fact that somebody wrote in just with some great news. Doesn't want any help, just wants to let us know about something great that happened. So let's take a look. So Linda writes, I don't have a question, but some great news. My 16-year-old daughter has Asperger's, and we were just informed by her guidance counselor that she will have enough credits to graduate 6 months earlier next year. We're so proud of her. So
that's awesome.
Yeah, someone
that's
doing
terrific.
great in high school.
Congratulations. That's terrific. Very nice to hear.
Congratulations, Linda. All right, let's take a look at the next question. Melanie writes in, what's the best way to help my 5-year-old nonverbal child understand what the toilet is for? When I sit him on the potty every 15 minutes, he looks at me like I've lost my mind. That's great. I love that. My poor husband has demonstrated more times than he cares to admit.
That's awesome.
So potty training is a continuing challenge, right? We get these questions frequently.
Yeah, and yet what's interesting is that, like, from a behavioral perspective, it actually tends to be one of the easier things that we deal with. And I always say that to parents who come in for intake and they're so overwhelmed with the concept of potty training. It doesn't quite work with modeling. And I think, if I'm not wrong, the best procedure still we use, and I know a lot of people in the field uses the Fox and Azrin procedure, and believe it or not, that procedure has been in place for over, I would say, 30 years at least, because that was the first that I learned. And it's a very, it's a great and very simple procedure. I think you can probably also get it online, and if you can't, please feel free to write in, and we'll actually send it to you in an abridged version, and you can also get the lengthier version, of course. Essentially, the procedure is first of all, and this depends, is this a girl or a boy, did they say? It doesn't really matter. Say. I mean, at this point, you essentially...
Oh, boy. Yeah, boy.
Yeah, so what you're doing is it's kind of a reverse shaping procedure. So you start by spending a lot of time in the toilet with the child sitting on the toilet and with shorter periods of time off the toilet. And the reason you're doing that is so that the child actually does void and does gain a ton of reinforcers for voiding in the toilet. And if you stay on the toilet long enough and you're drinking a lot of liquids during that day, eventually you're going to have to void. And when you do, of course, the reinforcers are given and you're allowed as a reward also off the toilet. And over the course of a few days, and as the child gets more and more successful with this, the schedule kind of reverses so that you are now just on a time frame of going to the toilet, maybe sitting there for 3-5 minutes, and then the rest of the time you're free and running around. And so it's kind of a reverse shaping procedure. It is really successful, pretty straightforward, and we used to do this procedure when we were students at UCLA, so it isn't something that's very hard. I think it works the easiest with children the younger they are, maybe 3 or so, 2 or 3. Obviously, at that point, the child, you would remove the diapers or underwear the whole day that you're working on this. I think part of the success of this is that you don't just do it as you're doing other things. You literally take 2 or 3 days off and do nothing else. You really focus on this. So the child, when they're running around the house and they don't have diapers on, they're going to feel a little bit uncomfortable about urinating, let's say, because they don't have a diaper on or underwear, and you will be able to tell when it's about to start and make sure that the child is successful. And just due to the reinforcers that they receive once they void in the toilet, the process, they get it. They start to understand that this is what I'm supposed to do.
That's right. And, of course, it's always important to emphasize it's all based on positive reinforcement. We want to make it fun, huge rewards that the child wouldn't have the opportunity to earn in any other way. Sometimes people will decorate the bathroom, right, with posters of the child's favorite cartoon characters or play music that they love.
Oh, we used to put TVs in the bathroom. Make it a very pleasant place to go.
We call it sort of a potty party, right? So,
absolutely.
Oftentimes we'll do this starting on a Friday night or a Saturday morning, and honestly, by Monday morning, the kid is already peeing on the toilet a lot and getting reinforcers for it and spending a lot more time out of the bathroom.
Yeah, and
it's not uncommon to see a huge effect in
It is, and there's some little things that are pretty important, like if you don't really, like you take a very high level reinforcer, like let's say the television, and you have it in the bathroom, and you only allow the child to watch the TV once they urinate in the bathroom, not the rest of the time. And so that kind of automatically will produce this desire in the child to go to the bathroom and urinate, and then you can gradually give the reinforcer in other settings afterwards. Now keep in mind that you focus on urination, not on bowel movements at this point. If you catch a couple of bowel movements, that's great. You want to reinforce that too, but you're not expecting the child, especially if it's a young child, to be trained both with urination and bowel movements at the very first weekend. And the second thing to keep in mind is that you're not talking about nighttime training. This is for during the day. Nighttime training, often a lot of the kids will continue to need to have diapers or pull-ups until you do a whole different procedure to try to get them off during the night.
That's right.
But, it's a very effective procedure, Fox and Azrin, and as I said, please feel free to write into us and we'll send you that, or I'm pretty sure if you even Google that, it should come up.
Yeah, absolutely. In fact, interesting note is that book is actually the best-selling book in the history of applied behavior analysis. Sold more books than anything by Skinner or anybody else.
Right.
Because it has, everyday practical use for virtually anyone who tries to use it. It really, really works.
And it's a very... while it's easy to understand, it's extremely just based on pure science, and it's a very well-written book.
One other thing that you already mentioned, but I want to reiterate, because we've actually done a couple studies on this, is that you really do have to remove the diapers. We've actually done a couple studies showing that if you keep the child in diapers while trying to potty train, they'll pee in the diaper a lot and not urinate in the toilet very much, right? And so if you take the diapers off, you think, oh no, we're going to have accidents, I'm going to spend all day cleaning up accidents, right? Well, no, it turns out, as you said, the kid gets feedback, right? The kid doesn't really want to urinate on themselves, and so the few times that they do, they get immediate feedback, which then helps decrease that behavior in the future and helps them be more successful on the toilet.
Yeah, it's little things like that that are so important. And I remember when you guys did that research study, and it's really interesting that you wouldn't think that, but the child actually feels the difference.
That's right. All right, let's have a look at the next question. From Stephen. I'm hearing on NPR that there's an untapped market for people with Asperger's. Seems their high rate of productivity percentages are impressive. So I think we're talking labor market here. What do you know what to look for in phrasing this trait in applications and resumes? So I'm guessing he's talking about maybe tips for how to compose a resume or an application for someone who has Asperger's disorder and is applying for a job. Do you have any thoughts there?
It's interesting because I think I would tend to agree with that. That I wouldn't say that all individuals with Asperger's have the same skill level, but I do see some of them have very specific kind of advanced skills in one area or another, and usually those are in mathematical concepts or memory-related things. We used to have someone who had Asperger's and was here for a while and used to be in charge of benefits, and it was pretty interesting because that individual could very easily remember hundreds of employees and who had what type of benefit structure and so on. And of course those things, just having that type of visual memory that's organized in that format is extremely beneficial, useful. Sometimes when I have some type of activity like some areas of data analysis or those types of things, I'm always looking for someone with those skills. So I wouldn't necessarily tie it into just the label Asperger's on a resume, but I would make sure to say, has very acute memory skills or strong ability with mathematical concepts and those types of things, because of course in the normal population, the typical population, you also have individuals who have those specific skills.
Right, and so it becomes less relevant whether or not you're on the spectrum, but simply do you have skills that the potential employer is going to value, and how do you sort of emphasize those in the resume?
Absolutely, yeah.
All right, let's have a look at our next question. We put out a sort of a general question to our viewers asking, what is your child's most challenging behavior? And we promised to talk about them on the show. So let's have a look at some of our viewers' contributions. Okay, one viewer writes in, arrogance. My son is a little factoid machine and looks down at everyone, including his parents, for how little we all know. It's great. It makes it difficult for him to relate to everyone around him.
Right, that's terrific. You know, that goes back to the previous question about some of our kids who have amazing memories.
Right.
And a lot of the kids actually tend to, this becomes one of their, something negative for them in their lives, because it's so easy for them to memorize facts. And those could be, I've had children who memorized geographical facts, historical facts. I had a child who knew everything you could ever imagine about every president of the United States. And I think it's sort of, for the child, it's kind of a game that they play because they're not very good at the social types of games as they're developing, and they don't enjoy necessarily the interactions with peers, but they're very rewarded, I guess, by just adding to those particular facts. So it's like anything else, that when you become very good at something, a lot of people will tend to become arrogant about it, and they're not even aware that they're being arrogant about it. Now, I think, so let's assume that we're just approaching the concept of what is arrogance, and I think it's more than, let's not just call it arrogance, but it's kind of the inability to see that, we're showing off about a particular skill that we have, and it's the inability to understand that all different people have different skill levels of different things, and that we are all good at one thing and not so good at something else. And it goes more to the concept of understanding that we're all equal and need to be respectful of each other. And those are some principles that I think would be important to teach the child, kind of like, what are pointing out or maybe listing some of our own areas that are difficult, weaknesses, and then pointing out or listing other people's strengths, so that the child understands, first of all, that other people have different strengths as well. And then secondly, I think it goes to that whole theory of mind or social cognition deficit, because the child has to be able to see how other people are viewing him when he's showing off. And I don't think our kids have that ability. So it would be very important to perhaps either model that and just be someone, pretend to be someone that's showing off about something all the time and only wants to talk about their own subject, and then review that video maybe with the child and say, look, how does that seem to you? What do you think other kids are thinking? How do you think other people are perceiving this? We do have a number of lessons in the skills curriculum that kind of go to this, because and it falls all under the cognition curriculum area, because it really does have to do with teaching the child to be aware of how other people are watching him or seeing him, and how that would lead to others not wanting to play, not wanting to interact. And so you really have to kind of model it and describe and explain the offensive features of arrogance to the child.
Absolutely. I see our therapists do that a lot with the kids that we serve, where they'll maybe show a clip from a children's TV show where one character is being really arrogant or really boasting or really bossy or whatever the character trait is, and they'll pause it and say, okay, why was he acting that way? How could he act different? What effect did it have on his friends? Right. How would you feel if he was acting that way to you? How would he feel if you were acting that way to him? Right. Exactly. And I've seen people make some good progress in that way.
And also, like anything else in behavior analysis, where you try to identify the function and you try to find a replacement behavior, you really have to understand that sometimes for our kids, when they're showing off like this, it simply means that they're not getting enough reinforcers.
Right.
And they're seeking out the reinforcers. In other words, look how good I am with all these facts I've memorized, and I really want acknowledgement. And so it would be important to give the child those same level of reinforcements, that attention for maybe not showing off, or maybe pointing out the skills of other people. Like, you'd really want to find a more adaptive behavior, a more functional behavior. Could be a completely contradictory behavior, which would be, every time you point out someone else's good points, then I'm going to really give you a lot of attention. And that would be important as well, because obviously we tend to show off when we have low self-esteem, or when we have not enough, we don't believe in ourselves.
We want approval. Right?
Exactly.
And of course, as you mentioned, the whole functional approach to everything we do in ABA is reminding us, well, the kid's not wrong for having that function. So if the function is, I want approval, the kid's not wrong. Right. It's fine that the kid wants approval, right? And so our job as parents and as therapists and service providers is to figure out other ways, more appropriate ways for the kid to still get what he wants. So yeah, he should get a bunch of approval. Why not? He's smart. He's a great kid. Now let's figure out a more adaptive way to do it.
Right. And, just going back to the exact language that this parent wrote about, sometimes our kids will also just tend to want to play that one game where they're good at it. And so you end up seeing kind of what I think the parent referred to as the rude portion of it, or the arrogant portion of it, because the child really only wants to engage in that. And if you're not engaging in that particular activity, then they'll throw a fit or not want to engage at all. And that's very important, is to really get the child to be able to engage in other activities. We actually years and years ago started to measure even just the conversation. When kids are limited in their scope, they will have 5-10 exchanges of conversation if it's on a topic that they're good with versus a topic that they're not really good at, and then the conversation drops to maybe 1 or 2 exchanges. And so, you'd have to reestablish and make sure that you're engaging in games where the child is good, but also other games where the child isn't so good, and then teach the child to really observe and point out and recognize other people's strengths in those games.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
One other, and I guess we probably should move on to another question at some point, but this is an interesting question.
It is.
Because it's such a subtle thing, arrogance. It's not something we really actually talk about a lot in ABA treatment and in autism, but it seems to me that a lot of times the difference between something that's appropriate socially and something that would be considered arrogant is very, very subtle.
It's extremely
very hard to define,
subtle,
right? And so it might require actually role-playing with a child and specifically prompting them to say it in a way that's arrogant and say, look, how does that sound? Okay. And then specifically prompting them to say it in a way that's polite. Even the exact same words sometimes could be said with a different tone of voice and a different facial expression and have a completely different effect on your peers. Right?
Absolutely right.
And it's going to require practice and video modeling and role playing, and it's going to require lots of feedback. It's not just, you don't just tell the kid and then expect that, I guess he should get it now, right? That's not how learning works.
Absolutely. And, the opposite, I guess, of arrogance is humility. And years and years ago, I remember, I think it was a parent who had written into us and said something like, do you guys have a program, and then we developed this program, but do you guys have a program that teaches the kids to be more polite? And it was kind of interesting because you realize that, typically developing kids go through a series of, failures and successes in life, and they learn sometimes, not always, but sometimes they learn politeness as a result of those failures, because they kind of, they learn when it's not appropriate to say something or how to say it. Just like you said, it's just the very, very subtle features of what is considered polite. Please have a seat versus sit down, for instance. And so we did put a whole program in, which is called Politeness. But I find that a lot of with autism, with our kids, it's one thing to go ahead and try to teach them the content of what's considered to be humility and politeness. It's another thing to teach them the features of it, just like you said, kind of the way you say it, when you say it, all of that. And then it's another thing to teach them just to inhibit their own, desire to show off.
Right.
So inhibition is another big feature of this, because a lot of times our kids really do want to actually play by the rules and do the right thing, but they just can't hold back, and they have to say something, and then it kind of ruins the thing. So it is a step by step. It's a very complex thing to teach, and I would say if you're at this level, if your child is at that level, you would really benefit from both the cognition and executive functioning areas of the skills curriculum, which is the CARD curriculum, because there's a lot that goes into getting a child to the point where they're fully aware of their environment and other people. And you really do need to kind of teach some of the basic steps before you start to approach just a very abstract concept like arrogance.
Yeah, I guess we've broken it down into probably a couple hundred different activities really,
Yes.
that you could do to address arrogance and other issues of perspective taking and self-control and self-monitoring.
Absolutely. I mean,
all of that stuff.
something like this, you know, if a child's not even able to take someone else's perspective, all the way back to the beginning of our programs would be maybe sensory perspective taking. A lot of times our parents don't realize that our kids just they really do see the world differently.
Right.
And they don't recognize that other people see things differently. So, you know, that's why the cognition curriculum takes you through this whole area where we teach our kids first how to take someone else's sensory perspective. Like, in other words, what do you see versus what does he see? What do you hear and what does he? And then how does that influence your thoughts? You know, thinking, which is a whole area in cognition. And then how does that influence your beliefs? How does that influence your preferences? And those are big areas. And you have to kind of go step by step to understand all of those in order to realize, oh wait, other people have different preferences than I do. They don't like it when I'm showing off. I might enjoy it, but they're not really enjoying it,
Right.
you know. So it's a lot of work to do in that area.
All right, let's move on to our next viewer question. Again, we're talking about challenging behaviors here. And the viewer writes in, my 6-year-old cousin/foster daughter, her defiance, obsession with the words poop and pee, and her other fixations. The fixating on poop and pee when talking about anything and everything and thinks it's funny drives me crazy. She's also so needy. If she could literally crawl up my womb, I think she would be happy. I can't do anything or say anything without her having to know or be a part of it. And I get no space. And she can't seem to get close enough to me. I know she is insecure, and I reassure her as much as possible.
Right. So, you know, right off the bat, the first thing that occurs to me, and I'm sure to you as well, is that she is attention-seeking. She's attention-seeking in multiple different ways. One way is that she wants to be involved in everything that you're doing because she wants your attention. And she's also attention-seeking by saying things that particularly get a reaction out of you, like poop and pee. So, you know, the very short response to this is you need to do two things. One is you need to not give attention for the things that you don't want to increase or continue. And the second one is to give attention for behavior that's more appropriate. So let's break that down for a second. I'm pretty sure that it sounds like you're at a frustration level where when she says those words, you react. And your reaction, believe it or not, negative or positive, it doesn't matter, is what she's seeking. So you would have to really work on not reacting at all when she says those words. And that's really difficult, obviously, because when we start to ignore something and put it on extinction, what tends to happen is that it's called an extinction burst. So it'll get worse before it gets better, which, you know, you really have to perhaps take some sedatives that day or be able to handle it for a little bit, because she will try to get the same reaction out of you, and she'll be kind of confused why she's not initially, and you have to write it out and make sure that she doesn't continue to get any kind of reaction out of you with those words. And ideally, if you could do this in sort of a closed environment where she's also not getting a reaction from other people when she says those words, maybe a day or two, it'll start to really go down when she spends a little bit of time and she notices that, oh, I'm not getting any kind of reaction out of this. At the same time, you do have to spend specific amounts of time, structured time, doing more appropriate adaptive types of activities where you do give her a lot of attention. Because again, remember, the function is she needs attention. She's doing whatever she can to get your attention. And the more you reject her, the more that's going to increase, because she's just... Your rejecting her is a form of attention. So, you really do need to have specific set structured activities with her where she's getting a ton of positive reinforcement and attention, and then when she says those types of things, you're not really responding or reacting to it. Do you have any thoughts on that as well?
No, that's exactly what I was going to say too.
Yeah. I mean, it's a very tough situation, because it's going to be very hard for you to make sure she doesn't get attention on those words from other people. It's just, that's how it is, and people will be shocked or surprised, and that's why she's doing it.
Right. Another thing that's worth pointing out to the viewers is when you live with a child or work with a child who does have kind of persistent, challenging behaviors, whether it's inappropriate language, whatever it is, you kind of have set up a history, sort of a way of interacting with them that's become normal for both of you, right?
Yes.
So it's normal for your child to push your buttons, and it's become normal for you to withstand it as much as you can, and then... at some point you can't anymore, right? And so it's become normal for you to have anxiety about whether or not that behavior is going to happen. It's become normal for you to try to resist getting mad, and it's become normal for you to eventually snap, right? I mean, that's what happens. And so when you do start an effective behavioral intervention procedure, almost by definition, it shouldn't feel normal. It shouldn't feel natural. If it feels totally natural to you, then it's probably not much different from what you've already been doing, which isn't working, right? So the first day or two, as you're describing, it's going to be challenging, and it's not going to feel right. It's going to feel weird. But the number one thing, too, also is... what some people call catching the kid being good. So like you were saying, lots and lots of positive attention when the behavior isn't happening. So if you're going to be hanging out with your daughter for an hour, probably what you're doing now is worrying about when the next time is that she's going to say the inappropriate language or do something annoying and be all over you. The best thing to do is at the beginning of that hour is start thinking immediately, how can I catch her being good and give her some attention? So don't wait, don't be reactive, right? Be proactive. Don't wait until your kid starts to do the thing you don't want him to do. Try to catch them before they've started that and give them what they want, right? While they're being good. And that can really go a long ways.
Definitely, and that's a really good point you're making there. And, having said that, I just can't help but, if you were a parent that I was working with, I would, I guess the first thing that I would notice, rather than trying to alter the child's behavior, is that you really, this parent really sounds worn out and just frustrated. I would really suggest some respite for yourself, because sometimes we get to a point where we're so irritated, we're so tired, we're so worn out that there is no way we can conduct these types of behavioral interventions. With behavioral interventions, you really need to be full of energy and very neutral. You can't be already kind of in a exhausted or in a kind of reactive stage. And I think that it would be the best solution, and it is an important thing, as Jonathan said, if you don't deal with this continues to be your mode of interacting with each other forever, and it only gets worse, really, with time and age. So I think the best solution at this point, if you can, is to possibly actually hire a behaviorist who can come in and intervene at least some of the time, some of the period of time, so that you have freedom to do some of your own things, so that you are not so reactive, not so overwhelmed or exhausted as well. And they are helping to set the contingencies environmentally and get things going, because when you come to a behavioral intervention with that level of sort of frustration and exhaustion, it just doesn't usually succeed. It is important for yourself to also have that, and it's a very natural reaction, of course, and I want to make sure I say that we, even with typically developing kids, we get overwhelmed when they're all over us and constantly want our attention. And so it's very normal that you would feel exhausted, irritated, and that, you just kind of want to have some alone time. That's very, very normal. And you deserve it.
Absolutely.
And so if you can try to produce that and give yourself some off time and have the help of a behaviorist to manage some of these things initially, I think that would be very important as well.
Absolutely. And with that, I think it might be time to move to a break. Is that right, Emily? So after the break, we're going to come back with some more questions from viewers.
Do you think Jack knows what's happening today?
Not a clue. We asked him where the baby was, and sometimes he points here, and sometimes he just points here and says belly button. So he's either getting a baby sister or a belly button. He's not sure. Good. What about this one? It's a rooster. Yeah. Another one. Sure. Which one do you want? Okay, here you go.
Jessica gave Jack Riley a partial vocal prompt to get him to ask instead of demand the puzzle from her. Last week she had to prompt him by saying,
Say, can I?
Hi, guitar.
Sure.
but now she only makes the sound to get him to ask. Eventually, he will need no prompting.
Case.
Case?
Yes, I want case. Case.
Yes, you can. There you go. Should we dance and sing? Should we say head, shoulders, knees, and toes? Yeah?
Double five.
Okay, let's sing the song first, though.
Double.
Sing song first. Ready?
Double.
Head.
Double.
Head. Sing first, and then Dumbo.
Why?
Sing first.
Why?
Now that Jack Riley has language, he negotiates with Jessica instead of tantruming or crying like he would have.
Eyes and ears and
No.
and
No.
good. Head, shoulders, knees and toes. Whoa! You almost ate there. Yeah, you finished the song. Okay, come here. Whee! Whoa! It's like you're Superman, huh? It's like you're Superman. Come here. Jack Riley, come here. Come here. Thank you. Sit down. No. No. Jack Riley. No, look at my eyes.
Sit down.
No, sit down chair.
Sit down.
No, sit down chair.
Sit down.
No, sit down chair.
She wants.
No, Jack Riley, you need to sit down chair. Thank you. Oh. Thanks. Good boy. High fives for good sitting. Thank you.
What happened?
That I was actually reading notes from other therapists that are on his team that he's been non-compliant when it comes to sitting in the chair. But right now it just seemed like he didn't want to do it because you asked him to do it, or I asked him to do it. And then I was prompting him to sit in the chair. But then once I just backed off, he sat on his own, like it's on his own terms, basically. But I didn't want him to get away with, if I asked him to do something, he has to do it. And that applies to when I ask him to do other things too, so that he doesn't learn that if I just ask him something and don't follow through, then I don't have to listen to Jessica. I'll just listen to her whenever I feel like it.
Right.
And he's been really exercising just because he can vocalize what he wants now. He wants it every time he asks for something, and then if you don't give it to him, then that's what happens. I do want him to learn that just because he asks nicely doesn't mean he'll get everything every time.
Are you excited? You excited?
He's sleeping.
Are you sleeping?
So what time are you going to leave, Mike?
We have OT at 11.
Oh, you still have OT today?
Yeah.
Doesn't it feel like it closed?
Yeah, well, that's the life of that's our life now.
Let's go back out.
I'm going to go, I got to go take a shower because we're going to have a baby. See you later.
Hi, I'm Dr. Jonathan Tarbox, filling in for Shannon Penrod here on Autism Live, broadcasting from the Center for Autism and Related Disorders. We are doing the Ask Dr. Doreen segment today. We're just about to wrap up our show with one final question from viewers. Shall we go ahead and get started?
Sure.
All right. The question from the viewer is, how could you best explain to people that autism does not go away, but that every child can improve? Just because a child is not the stereotype does not mean that they miraculously just stop all of the behaviors and anxieties associated with self-regulating and social skills. It's very frustrating, especially for those in education who have not lived with it. Please help.
Wow, that's such a fabulous question. I'm so impressed with the parent who wrote that. So what I always say is that and this is the definition of any disorder in the diagnostic manual, is that the symptoms of the disorder have to be so, prevalent that they completely conflict with having a successful, adaptive life at home or school or work, depending on the age. And unless they conflict significantly or prevent the individual from having a adaptive life or functional life, then they're not considered. It's not considered a disorder. And I've said that for years and years because that's how you're trained when you diagnose things. And it's funny because in the latest DSM, it actually does say that with autism. It says that the symptoms have to be pervasive enough to take away from normal functioning. What I always say with our kids, and this is such a big thing for people to say, to use the word recovery or not recovered. Clearly, with autism, for instance, which is the most severe, I guess, of the spectrum disorders, you have to have a minimum of 6 symptoms within those particular areas or more. And of course, often our kids will decrease the symptoms, which are, you can teach a child eye contact. You can teach a child language to the point where they're communicating normally. You would hope so. Otherwise, what are we doing here, right? And so as we teach those things, the child's symptoms will go from 6 to 5 to 4 to 3. And if I was to re-diagnose the child at that point, I'd say, okay, now the child is no longer autistic, has autistic disorder, but now has PDD-NOS. And ultimately, you get to a point where the child doesn't have any language delay and perhaps has some social delays. And then perhaps the child's diagnosis would change to Asperger's. In some cases, we have a hard time teaching our kids inhibition, and at that point, perhaps the child's diagnosis would change more to ADHD. It doesn't really matter. The point is that obviously, as the child learns skills, they lose some of the symptoms of autism, and so you could have 5 symptoms and you no longer would qualify for diagnosis of autism. Just that simple. So explaining that to people, I think, is very difficult. I mean, I've struggled with that for 30 years, and people will criticize us and so on, because I think also what happens, Jonathan, is that when someone is diagnosed, for the rest of his or her life, everyone is putting them under a spotlight, and often our kids are functioning better than their typical peers in a million different ways. I mean, look at how many of our kids are in college and how many of the general public of the United States actually end up going to university-level education, you know? And they're doing great. They have boyfriends, girlfriends, etc. And as soon as they do something that could potentially be labeled as the spectrum of autism, they are, because they're so under the spotlight and everybody's trying to evaluate whether they're typically developing or not, or is that a symptom of the autism or not, and that sort of thing. And so often I tell parents, if you get to a point where your child is functioning pretty well, try to kind of get rid of all that previous history as much as possible, because when people still don't have a good understanding of autism, and they do tend to believe that in most cases it's lifelong. And I don't know that it is. I don't think that it is in every case. And it would be important for the child to try to be integrated and not necessarily picked at or put under a spotlight all the time. At the same time, some of our kids are proud of the fact that they used to have a diagnosis of autism and that they overcame so much of the difficult symptoms and are able to actually lead typically healthy lives. So it's a very difficult thing to deal with, but I guess the short answer is just tell people not to be so hung up on the label. I mean, the label keeps changing every 10 years or so anyway, and really it's just a list of symptoms, and often our kids don't have all of the symptoms that are required for an actual official diagnosis. It's a hard area.
It is. It's a tough question, but I think that hopefully you gave the viewer some clarity
I hope so.
there. All right. Well, with that, I think we're out of time now. So I wanted to say a very special thank you to Dr. Grant-Pichet
for a lot of fun as always.
Taking an hour out of your week. Insanely busy travel schedule and work schedule. So we know it's not easy to take time. So we appreciate it.
Thank you.
And thanks very much to all the Autism Live viewers who wrote in questions and who keep the show interesting and relevant. And with that, I guess we're signing off. I'm Dr. Jonathan Tarbox. Thank you very much for watching.
We are here at the Act Today for Military Family Fun Run, and I'm with a bunch of gentlemen who are getting ready to run a 10K. Gentlemen, what do you have to say? And there we have it.
Really is inspiring to see how you all have turned out to help military children with autism. And to me, all of you military runners out there are the real superheroes, okay? So we don't need to be at home watching cartoons. We got the real thing right here. Let's hear it for the military!
We're here with Staff Sergeant Email, and we're thrilled to see all of these fit young men out here, and we're told that you're responsible for having gotten them all here. Tell us how you made that happen.
We got roughly about 69 Marines out here this morning, and we're going to run on behalf of our Gunnery Sergeant Tajma and all autism children out there and anyone else. So that's
you're going to get the job done?
Yes, ma'am.
Well, we appreciate it. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, ma'am, for having us to come out here.
Runners, take your mark. Set.
We're here with the winner of the 10K. Tell us your name.
Mike Johnson.
And tell us why this event was so important to you to come out for.
Well, I work for One Hope. We've been the sponsor for 3 years, and it's just a fun day to come out and get the whole team out here. And
do you know what your official time was yet?
37:10, 37:20.
Congratulations to you and One Hope.
Thank you. We're happy to be here, and hope it went well for all the fundraising.
Thank you so much.
Great.
Okay, we're here with the number 2 finisher of the 10K. Congratulations. What's your name?
Eli McMahon.
And why are you here today?
I'm out here to support all the military families. I'm also a captain in the Army. One of a kind out here because mostly Navy Marines, but I figured I'd show my support.
We're here with Mark Christopher Lawrence, who's just come across the finish line. Mark, how long did it take you to do the 10K?
2-3 days.
So wonderful to have you here at this event. Why are you here supporting as you do so often?
Well, this particular event is in support of military families, and the military allows me to do what I do. I mean, because of the military, we have freedoms in America that are not afforded to people all over the world, and so greatest country in the world, right here I am.
We're standing right in front of the Card Kids Zone area. What a wonderful area that you guys contributed to this event.
The Card San Diego office really had a great time putting together. They are one of the, I think, the top fundraiser for this event. All the therapists came out, so it's wonderful.
Tell me who I'm standing here with.
I am Robin Martinez, and I am the proud mother of my son Jake here, who has autism.
And you're sporting these fabulous T-shirts, Navy Team Jake. So what has it been like being a military family with a child on the spectrum?
When he was diagnosed, we had just been restationed to Hawaii, so we didn't have a support system in place. We were alone, and it was frightening. It felt isolating. We didn't really know anything about autism at the time, and that's why we support ACT Today. That's why we're here today, is there is a program now that supports military families with children with autism.
Tell me why you came to this event.
Because my son was diagnosed with autism when he was 3. I try to support autism in any way because I just want to see him function to his fullest ability.
What do you wish all of us knew?
I don't want to say it's hard because I love it. I mean, I love every minute of it, but it's hard when you're doing it all by yourself, and it's hard to know that you do have a support system, but they can't be there with you. And I think it's harder for him because he misses all the things that he does do, all the new developments and the new things he learns. He doesn't get to see him go through it.
We are here with Tom Leahy, the president of One Hope Wine. You are the title sponsor for this event. First of all, we have to thank you. This is a beautiful, beautiful event. Why is this important for you to sponsor?
Because it's such a big topic. We want to make a social impact in whatever we do, donating 50% of our profits back to different partner charities. We want the consumer, the end consumer, to go out and understand that by choosing to purchase One Hope, they're choosing the greater good for the community, which is important, and that's what we're founded on, and why we go to work every day.
We've all admired the socks and the outfit. We love the A on the front, peas in a pod, and then on the back it says, "I run for a hero." Tell folks why this is so important to you personally.
No, we love ACT Today. Everybody that comes into Jimmy's journey, we hold very close, even if they're there for a little bit or for a long time. And ACT Today has definitely been with us for 3 years, and we appreciate it, and we'll stick with them as long as we can. Not only did they, give us a grant that did so much for us, but, they have become family.
Are you also a military? Are you military?
My husband's been in the military for 20 years. This summer he hits 21, and my whole family's part of that journey, and he'll stay in. He'll probably do 30 until our insurance is willing to make that step and pay for ABA. We're going to head on with military.
When I asked a group of Marines earlier, who should I interview, they said that you guys were the ones to interview. Why would that be?
My battalion came out and supported not only our family but this event. I really appreciate them. We're touched, that they take from their limited time off to come out and support us, and it's really touching for our family to see we support each other in everything that we do, whether it's at the workplace or in our personal life.
We're here at the ACT Today Military Family Run. Tell me why this is important to you.
Because our son has autism.
You're also military, is that correct?
I'm in the Marine Corps.
I'm in the Navy.
So are you both active duty still?
Yes.
How does that work with a child on the spectrum?
It's difficult. We've, in the last 3 years, have gone on 3 deployments between the two of us, Afghanistan 3 times. And so being a single parent during those tours is definitely tasking on us as parents. But we've been able to get through it. We've been married almost 13 years.
And if there was one thing you wanted people to know about what it's like being in the military and having a child on the autism spectrum, what would it be?
It's very tasking on our relationship and our family. Yeah. as far as emotionally.
What kind of support would you like to see more of? What's helpful to you at this point?
We personally have not had any issues with support. Today, we're doing this for other families who do have that difficulty.
And clearly he's doing great.
Doing very good, yes. He's in ABA therapy, IBI therapy, all kinds of therapy. So he's definitely gotten way better since we first were diagnosed, yeah.
Well, you guys are inspirational. I have to hug you. But I have to say first, thank you for your service.
Thank you.
What's your favorite thing? What are you most into?
Starts with an L.
Is it Legos? Are you into Legos? I saw those eyes light up. My son's into Legos. Can I tell you something?
Yeah.
So nice to meet you. Have a great time. We are here with the lady of the hour.
I love the Marines. I have a soft spot for them. And I think, as a rule, our country takes them for granted too much. And you put autism into that equation. You put having a spouse, in the service, and they may be deployed, moving on average every 2 years. And if that's not hard enough, they don't get as many benefits because of the insurance laws that are recommended for behavior therapy, for ABA. And so that's why we started this campaign, to close the disparity. And it's been very successful. Act Today for Military Families, we've raised over $200,000 that's gone directly to the families across the country and gone to over 200 families. And we're going to keep doing this, until it's millions that are raised.
Good morning and welcome to Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy. And as you can see, it's just Nancy today. My dear co-host and friend is feeling a little under the weather today. So I'll be here alone, but I am going to be joined by a very special guest, Julie Kornack, who is the public policy analyst for Center for Autism and Related Disorders. And she's here to join me in sharing the information about our trip to Sacramento last week, which was really a dream come true for me, to be able to go to the state capitol, to meet with legislators, and to participate in an autism rally that was held last Tuesday, and testify before a legislative committee on legislation that is going to benefit families with children with autism enormously. So Julie's going to be joining me in the next segment. And as you saw the video prior to me coming on, that was the first time I'd seen it. And I was sitting here just when I listened to the parents and everything they have to sacrifice, and they still manage to serve our country and advocate for their children. I just think these military families are so deserving of our admiration and support. And if you were moved to help a military family, or you are a military family that needs help, please go to Act Today's website, act-today.org, and you will see a tab for our Act Today for Military Families program. And we certainly welcome your assistance if you want to donate any amount to help these families, or if your family needs a grant, you can go to our grant application. And it is our goal to raise, as I said in the last video, let's keep going till we hit 1 million for these families. We've raised about $200,000 that have gone directly to the care and treatment. The family requests what treatment they want, be it ABA therapy, any assisted technology, school support, summer support, and we have assisted about 200 families so far, and there are many, many more on the waiting list. So I'm going to start within the news today, and I have one story to share, and I'm hoping we can get some people involved in this story on the show in the next couple of weeks. A restaurant in Fullerton, California, named Bourbon Street, Bar and Grill has made prom inclusive for people of all abilities by hosting 10 special education students from Sonora High School in La Habra for an inclusive disability prom dinner. And that is going to be supported by behavior therapists that work at the school. And they are going to be having a wonderful, the behavior therapists are posing as servers, which I love that, so they can serve and assist. And it consists of 10 students. 3 of the students have Down syndrome. 7 of them have autism. And it's going to be chaperoned by the Sonora High School community-based instruction team, the host and hostess and waitresses, behavior-trained educators, provided through Fullerton Cares. And it's just so great. One of the moms who has a son who is participating, her name is Andy Sellers, and her son Christopher is 17 with autism. She says at the event, they are high school seniors and deserve this experience. These kids deserve to be part of society and not to go away, because autism isn't going away and disability across the board is not going away. I have a dream for my son to go to prom, and a clinical diagnosis is not going to change that. So I just think that, and then the owner is named Larry Hauser, and he's the Fullerton Cares founder, and he's the owner of the Bourbon Street Bar and Grill. And he says of the event, the goal with this dinner is inclusion. We will simulate a real neurotypical high school prom dining experience while also providing the therapeutic and behavioral support to make it accessible to those affected by developmental disabilities. Now, the other really cool thing about this is they have makeup artists and hairstylists that have volunteered their services to help these young people look and feel the best they can. And I think this idea is something that should spread across the country. I think every child with autism and every child with developmental delays should be allowed to participate in the prom. It's such, it's really a milestone. I didn't go to my prom. I was a little bit of a radical rebel girl, and I was kind of like, I'm not going to the prom. But for most people, for most young people, it's something they want to do. And I think our special kids really deserve this experience. And I just want to say, I think this guy is our hero of the week, Larry Hauser, And he, as I said, founded Fullerton Cares. It spreads autism awareness throughout North Orange County. And he has a son, 5, with autism. And we will be in touch with them, try to get Larry on the show. And hats off to all of them for giving our kids this special experience. So we're going to take a break, and when we come back, I'll be joined by the fabulous Julie Kornack, who's going to try and make a little of the legislative process understandable to us lay people, some of the things we can do to support legislation, some of the important changes that all of you need to know about, particularly here in California. And one thing to remember is that as California goes, so goes the nation. And we'll talk a little bit about that. It's very important to see some of these laws pass here, because if they are successfully implemented here in California, other states will pick up that ball and run with it, and it will start to spread nationwide. So stay tuned, and we'll be back in a few short minutes with Julie Kornack. Thank you.
When you find out you're having a boy, you always think like, oh, he's going to play football, he's going to do this and that. And then when he's diagnosed, all those things get washed away.
It's like that piece that's always in the back of your mind, where is he? What is he doing? Is he safe?
We really didn't know what we were dealing with. I wish that they could have directed me a little bit more and provided me some information.
I was a young mom. I didn't know what it was like to raise a boy, despite a boy with autism.
Hundreds of thousands of families are not getting the help they need for their children with autism all around the country. ACT Today is determined to bridge the gap. These families really have to go through a lot to get a grant. The application process isn't easy. The records, the diagnosis proof, they're really battling for their kids. So when we can give them a grant, it is so wonderful to see that they succeed in getting that help for their children. Our founder, Dr. Doreen is an amazing woman, and she is one of the world's foremost authority on behavior of children with autism. She's extremely knowledgeable, and she oversees every single grant we give. She is part of that process. People may think of autism care and treatment as simply schooling or therapy, but we provide important safety supports, things like fencing, for example. The whole family's living in fear of that child running out into traffic. I recently delivered an iPad to a little boy with some of the apps that are out there for children with autism. Miracles happen.
I got the iPad from ACT.
From ACT,
What did it say? Can you repeat that, Dustin?
I got the iPad from ACT.
We have helped so many military families, and when I think of these brave families that are fighting two battles, one to protect our country and one for the right treatment and care for their children, it breaks my heart, and I think we have to do more as a nation to help them.
There's not a day that doesn't go by that we don't think about it. Some people say, oh, he's normal. You don't see the battles that I see every single day. My husband does have to deploy, and when they get on that bus, that might be the last time that my kids ever see them.
So I called, and they informed me that he had received a grant, which was like a blessing from above. I was just like speechless. I just started to cry because, without it, we would have been lost.
The ACT grant was a total miracle. Without that, we wouldn't be able to receive the service dog. So we're so appreciative what they've done for us as a family.
Recently, ACT Today funded a program for military children with autism in San Diego, the Inclusion Films program, which is run by Joey Travolta, and teaches kids on the autism spectrum literal filmmaking skills. They learn how to make a movie.
Are we ready? There you go, got it. Okay. Everything that goes into the process of making a film goes into everyday life. So they're learning life skills, they're learning to collaborate.
It was really nice to know how much they were enjoying this camp, and they're with people who are supporting them and are making them feel great about themselves and their differences and their similarities. And I get two kids that are working together and apart and together and apart, so it's an interrelationship as well as a camp and a learning experience.
It's so fulfilling when I get letters. One stands out for me, a boy who was 14 with Asperger's, and we gave him a grant to go to a drama camp. He wrote to us and said, "Dear ACT Today, thank you for letting me belong for the first time in my life." These kids are remarkable. We underestimate them. They're so knowledgeable, they're so capable, and we can change the life of a family, which means changing the life of a community. We're back with Let's Talk Autism with Shannon and Nancy, and our dear Shannon is out today, so I'm flying solo here. And after watching that video, I just want to remind everybody that our Inclusion Films Camp for military children and their siblings, military children with autism and their siblings, is taking place once again this year. Very excited. We'll be down there in June, and once again, the film that the kids make will be shown at the San Diego Film Festival in October. You can go to ACT Today's website, act-today.org, and you will find information about the ACT Today for Military Families Inclusion Film Camp, which will be a 2-week session in June down near San Diego, sponsored by Cox Communications and ACT Today. And it is a remarkable experience. Joey Travolta leads the workshop. He is John Travolta's older brother, who is a filmmaker and has worked as a special ed teacher, and he puts on such a great experience for our kids, and I'm hoping that we have some listeners out there that might be able to take advantage of this. So go to our website, find the application, and we're going to have a great time. So now we are joined by my friend, my buddy, my fellow traveler, co-conspirator, Julie Kornack, who is the public policy analyst for Center for Autism and Related Disorders. Hi, Julie.
Hi, Nancy.
We had a great time last week, didn't we?
We had a great time.
I have to say, it was it was kind of a crazy week because, you know, we left on Monday at the crack of dawn.
Right.
We got to Sacramento. We went straight to the Capitol. And while that was going on, we heard about the bombings in Boston.
Right.
And you have a family member.
I have a son in Boston who was pretty near the finish line. So,
and that was kind of scary, and the whole country, I think,
it's personal for everybody. And then when you know somebody in Boston, it heightens it maybe just a little bit.
Yeah. So I had run the Boston Marathon in 1989 and worked there for 10 years at WBZ TV. So it was kind of that was a shocking experience. We were trying to hear what was going on, and at the same time, we were there in Sacramento, and I had never been to the state capitol. What an experience.
Yeah, I had never been either, and I was first of all, it's beautiful.
It's beautiful.
Just the welcome mat is out for the constituents.
Yes.
They want us. It was really fun to see all the students going in on the field trips. There were all these 4th and 5th graders walking in, and we were in line behind them to go through the metal detectors. And that just brings back memories for everybody, I think. Yeah. And then to be able to go to the offices of our legislators and meet with people and be welcomed. And the thing that's just so impressive to me is how informed they are about this issue and about autism and the needs of the autism community, and how eager they are to really play an active role in helping our families.
I think that our lawmakers, they've seen the statistics. They know 1 in 88 and possibly higher. And they realize that this is a real problem if our kids are not getting the proper care and treatment. So I think they are very, very willing and open to help us make a change. Now, on Monday, you and I went into a legislative committee to testify. Tell us what that process, what does that mean? We came in to sponsor 2 bills.
Right.
And we spoke before the committee.
Well, we spoke in support of 2 of the autism bills, AB 1231 and AB 1232. Mm-hmm. And each, when a bill is referred to a committee, then the author of the bill, in this case it was Assemblymember Perez, identifies at least two people to speak in support of the bill, and then people also have the opportunity to oppose the bill. And then the committee votes, and if they can vote the bill out of committee successfully, then it keeps moving forward. And if they don't, then it's sort of a critical point. It's an easy way for a bill to die. So that's why we were there, to make sure that the bill kept moving forward, and we found a lot of support. Both of our bills were voted unanimously.
Right. Tell us about the telehealth bill that you spoke in support of.
CARD sponsored the telehealth bill, and that's AB 1231. And thank you to everybody who sent letters of support, because that was terrific. We had a lot of support from the community for that. And the telehealth bill directs the State Department of Developmental I'm going to get it wrong now. DDS.
Okay. Yeah, DDS. Okay.
Everybody knows DDS, unfortunately. Directs DDS to authorize the regional centers to use telehealth if the families want that option, and when it's appropriate, for behavioral health treatment, for parent training, and for something that was new to both of us, I think, teledentistry. Mm-hmm. And it's really just a way, all of these autism bills that are in the legislature right now are intended to increase access for families, and nothing is there to impose any, policies on a family or anything like that. It's all just to give families more options.
Right.
And that's exactly what this would do, is if a family feels that it would prefer to do parent training online instead of going into a regional center, or if it's easier for the family to do it that way, then they'd be able to complete parent training online.
Yeah. Julie, I want to say that I think that is such an important service to offer, because going back to when I did the training, it was very hard to stay on track for me with regional centers. So much was going on at home with my son Wyatt and his autism. And both parents were asked to attend because both parents are part of the process and they need to learn the skills. And basically, the California Regional Center requires parent training because I'm sure most of our listeners here at Autism Live know, if the therapists don't act alone. They don't act in a vacuum. It has to be a total system of parental support.
That's right.
And the more we learn about ABA, which sometimes for my husband and for me was the antithesis of what I thought of as normal parenting.
Of course.
You know, giving things like a meltdown, giving it attention is not what you're supposed to do. You know, we learn about extinction and we learn about ignoring those behaviors. So I very clearly remember I remember having to watch a video. I remember having to do the parent training, go to a place and sit there for 2 days, I believe, while an ABA, a BCBA taught us some of the ways that it worked and what we were to do with our children.
Right.
And then when the therapy team started working with Wyatt, I saw how important it was that when the therapist goes out the door, that the parents carry over.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
The parents have to be sustaining the program, and that's going to amplify your chances of success and progress and all of that.
Right.
Everybody agrees that parent training is important. The issue that we've had for a lot of families, especially working families or families that are located in rural areas, is that their child will be identified as eligible for the behavioral therapy, really needing it. And then in order to access it, the parents have to complete this training. And if the parents don't complete the training, the child's not getting services.
And a lot of people do not complete the training.
And it's sad, but there are parents who can't afford the time off of work. They won't be paid if they don't work, and they're on a shoestring budget. And especially in these economic times, there's more and more families like that.
Right. And not just that. I think sometimes that a lot of families, after they get the diagnosis and they finally get to the point where they get to regional center and they realize they can get support, are oftentimes just too overwhelmed to fit it in.
Yeah.
And I mean, I have a friend who to this day never took advantage of getting the parent training, and then she did not get the services. And I keep saying go back to regional center because she still has a lot of issues with her child. So it is important that we do our part as parents to support the services that were being offered, because they will not be effective unless we have a team. And I often refer to myself as the quarterback in our house because, you know, I'm the one that has to say, okay, you know, clinic is here, and we're doing this here and this here, and I'm the master of the schedule.
Got the playbook.
Yeah, I got the playbook, and it takes a village to make this happen.
Yep.
So this was a very important piece of legislation.
And we're very hopeful that it's going to actually get a vote and move forward. And it's definitely out of this committee. It has one more committee meeting in the Health Services Committee, and I'm feeling pretty good about that. The great thing about this bill is that it directs the DDS to tell the regional centers that they can offer telehealth, and the regional centers are supporting this bill through ARCA, which is just amazing because in the past, the regional centers have sometimes been a little hesitant to throw their support toward a bill. They might not oppose it, but they won't actually actively support it. And we had the regional centers supporting this bill, which is just wonderful.
Right. So then we moved on to Bill 1232.
1232, which is the bill that Act Today is sponsoring.
Yes.
And that's a great bill. That bill comes out of a task force that Senator Steinberg convened to address a lot of the disparity issues that have been identified from one regional center to the next. And one of the critical components that people felt was missing in regional center services is sort of a sensitivity to different cultures and different languages. So this is an effort to ensure that people from different backgrounds are getting their needs met. So we already have every year the state of California already pays for a survey and pays a company to analyze whether regional center families feel that their needs are being met, and your bill, as I like to call it, will Nancy's bill will ensure that the one of the components that they analyze is whether families feel that their cultural and linguistic differences were sort of paid attention to, whether the regional centers were sensitive to that. So if they had a language barrier, they got information in their native language. Or if they have a cultural difference, maybe they don't want to have anybody in their home when the man of the house isn't home, or maybe they're just not comfortable with a certain aspect of the therapy, that was something that was acknowledged. And so it just adds an extra component to that survey. It doesn't increase the cost of it.
Right. We want to make that clear.
Right.
Now, Julie, I know I was very moved, and I know you were as well. There was a young mother there who spoke in support of this bill, and she was Hispanic.
Yes.
She spoke about the fact that her son was through the Early Start program, identified, given the diagnosis of autism at the age of 2, so he got a very early diagnosis. He started receiving regional center services for ABA. He received 40-hour-a-week of intensive services, which she continued to keep up.
Yes.
She didn't tell us how she did it, but she was able to continue getting him the 40 hours a week of services.
Yes.
And she spoke to the fact that many Hispanic families, because of the language barrier, they're very intimidated.
Yes.
And she personally knew of many families in her community that did not get services because of this intimidation factor, be it a language issue or a cultural issue.
Or not really understanding what's available.
Not understanding what's available.
Exactly.
Oftentimes. She also spoke to the fact that sometimes fathers may feel that there's nothing wrong here, or we don't need that kind of help. We can handle it on our own.
Right.
That sense of male pride can often take over, and just to be sensitive to some of these issues. And she spoke so eloquently, and you and I met with her after the session.
One of the remarkable things to me about working in this area is that we meet these families with these super women. I mean, I'm sure there's some great guys
and
out there.
Guys too. Hats off to the autism dads. We know they're warrior dads out there.
There are warrior dads, but these women, the thing that was astonishing to me and remarkable about this woman is that she got the services that she needed. She was one of the lucky ones. Her son was identified early. Most Latino families have an issue of having their children identified at the age of 7, sometimes an average age of 7.
Average age of 7.
Which is just, tragic because the developmental window is starting to close by then, and the amount of progress that they'll make is so limited compared to what will happen if they're identified earlier.
Mm-hmm.
So here's this woman who, her son was identified at the age of 2. She got everything that she needed, and it worked for her. And she could have just gone on and had a happy life.
He's mainstream now. He does have a support aide that is just there in the general classroom.
Right.
He's not sitting side by side with her son. And what was more remarkable to me, Julie, was that you and I called her that night because we had the rally the next day.
Right.
We asked her if she could come participate in the rally, support card, and act today in rallying for these bills and just having a presence. And she said to me, I need to see if I can change some doctor's appointments around. She called me back and she said, I couldn't change them around. I have a daughter with Down syndrome who's 15, severely disabled, born without an esophagus, and she requires a lot of medical treatment. And I just thought to myself, okay, here's a mom. She has a cultural, she's got some issues with the fact that Spanish was her first language. She had to battle for services for her child. She has a daughter with Down syndrome with severe medical issues. And all she could say is, thank you for everything you and Julie are doing for our families.
Yeah.
And I wish I could come support you today. And when I meet people like that, that's what keeps me going.
Well, and the thing that is so remarkable is that while she got the services that she needs, she wants to make sure that everybody gets that.
Exactly.
It's not just about her.
She sees the disparity, and so she's been called to become an advocate for other families.
Exactly.
And I think it helps empower her. I know it empowers me when I help other families to not be so focused on, my particular situation and my son's autism, but anything we can do to help those along. And she was an example of that.
Absolutely.
So we did, I did also speak about 1232.
Yes.
And I spoke in relation to, at ACT Today, we realized there was a need to help Hispanic families with the application process because we did not have an online application in Spanish, which we do have now. And I'm very happy to say that after losing our program assistant, who was our bilingual ACT Espanol assistant, we have a new program assistant. Carla Najari is joined us, and she is at the ACT Today office for any families out there that need assistance and would like to, if Spanish is a first language, you can call Carla, and you can call her at our offices at 818-705-1625, and hopefully I'll bring Carla on. Who knows, I may even drag her up here for the end of the show to introduce her. But she is there to answer your calls, and you can apply for an ACT Today grant in Spanish.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, it's great. And one of the things we're trying to do at ACT Today and with Center for Autism and Related Disorders is to sponsor a conference or a seminar for the Hispanic community.
Exactly. We're working on the Hispanic community, specifically Coachella Valley area, for several reasons. One is that President Clinton's Clinton Health Matters initiative identified Coachella as one of 2 places in the country with the greatest health disparity. And we acknowledge that. We absolutely agree that that's an area that needs to be targeted. And CARD has an office in that area, and ACT Today is interested in doing its conference there.
Right.
And now we have the support of the 2 senators from San Diego.
Yes, and they were at the rally on Tuesday.
Right, as well as Assemblymember Perez. Everybody's interested in participating in this.
Right. And Julie and I went to the rally on Tuesday morning.
Right.
And there were all kinds of individuals from our community. There were advocates. There were many individuals on the spectrum.
Okay.
Some of them had rode buses in, and some of them were older and living in assisted living or independently living. There were younger kids there. There was a band that performed. And then we heard from a couple of remarkable legislators that have really been champions of us. Can we talk about Darrell Steinberg for a minute? He is the president of the Senate, correct?
He's the president pro tem of the Senate, and he is absolutely the hero of the autism community. He has made this...
There he is with Julie.
He has made this his issue, and what an amazing person. He's the reason that we have an autism mandate in the state of California, and he really understands this issue. His goal is to make California a model not only for autism treatment but also for mental health in general. He's always going to Washington, D.C. and trying to get people who don't maybe understand the importance of this issue to sort of get it on their radar. He's a true champion for the autism community. And one of the things that he talked about, one of the big issues on his radar right now is to try to get help for Medi-Cal families, because right now Medi-Cal families do not get ABA treatment. And that's sort of a short-term view on what should be a long-term view.
Yes.
Because obviously, as we all know, it's much cheaper, less expensive to society if kids get help early. And if kids don't get the help they need, then there's a Harvard study that estimates that we're spending about $3.1 million over the course of one individual's lifetime to give that individual the support that he or she needs because she hasn't been able to gain the independence independence or the skills that are needed to be able to contribute to society or be independent or whatever the goals are.
I mean, the higher functioning our children can become, the more they can manage their own self-care, the more functioning they can be in society, the better for everyone. And then there's no drain on the system.
Yeah, this really is a community issue. It's not that you have a family who's hoping to get taxpayer funding to help their child have a better life, and it happens in a vacuum. When that child is lifted up, we're all lifted up.
It's a huge issue for our entire country.
Exactly.
And if California can be successful in showing this can be effective, then the rest of the country will take note. Washington will take note. Now, Senator Steinberg is terming out, is he not?
Yes, he is terming out.
And what do you think will be his path?
I can't believe he won't run for public office, but I don't know anything.
Okay. So,
he certainly has the support to do it. I think he can do anything he wants, but I don't know what his options are.
And how, so basically we should say to our viewers out there to support him in any way they can.
To support Senator Steinberg, something that he's done because he has a lot of foresight is he's made sure that the Senate Select Committee on Autism is staffed. It's got the most senators on it of any committee in the history of the California Senate, so that senators are really informed about this issue. So he has someone to carry on the work that he's already begun and been so successful at.
And we met a couple of those senators. I think Emily has a few pictures from the rally. I don't know if Emily, if you've shown them already, but there's some pictures from the rally. One is Senator Block.
That's Senator Correas.
That's Senator Correas.
Right. And there's Senator Block.
And there's Senator Block. Okay. I got them mixed up. Now, these two gentlemen, and there they are on the Capitol steps with Senator Steinberg, Areva Martin from the Special Needs Network. There's Julie and me over to your far left on the screen.
And I'm dressed, I have to say, for the rally.
We were dressed for the rally. We were not in our suits and heels, so please, we were the day before, but not this day.
That's right.
And Senator Steinberg, there I am in front of the Capitol. I had to tweet that and put it on Facebook. If my dad were alive today, he would have been so proud. There we are before we went on KQCA to talk about the work we're doing in Washington and what our senators are doing. And I want to say about Senator Steinberg before we get off the subject of him. He was there speaking in front of all these people that day. He was meeting so many people.
Yeah.
And as he met me, I introduced myself as executive director of ACT Today. And I said, and more importantly, I am the proud mother of a son with autism, Wyatt, age 11. And because of you and many of your efforts, my son now has ABA coverage through his insurance. And he looked me straight in the eye as though I was the only person in the world.
Yeah.
And he said, tell me how Wyatt's doing. And right at that moment, somebody grabbed him, so I'm going to write him an email and get it to him. But I was so impressed by his ability to just make you feel like
to personalize it.
Personalize it. And you know what? I got the feeling that that's really important to him.
Yeah. I think that he knows these aren't just statistics. These are people.
Yeah, yeah. And I also want to single out a very big champion of ours who's a consultant to Senator Steinberg, and that is Dr. Lou Vismara.
Yeah.
Dr. Lou consults with the senator, and he is also one of the founders of the Mind Institute.
Right.
And he has an adult son with autism that is, I believe, in his 20s. So this is a gentleman who, many years ago when there were no services, saw the need to help other families. And he's a cardiologist, and he's there in the Senate, and he is just such a champion of ours.
He's a tireless advocate. Absolutely.
Yeah.
You can get an email from Lou at 6 in the morning and at 11 at night.
Yes.
He's always thinking about the issue.
Yeah, and trying to help other families.
Exactly.
So the rally was great. we're hoping that out of some of these connections that we'll be able to get some of these legislators involved in our effort to service the Coachella Valley and possibly work with the Clinton Initiative.
Right.
And so stay tuned for that. And we are hoping to involve our spokesperson for Acta Español, which is Gabriela Tessier,
Yes.
who is the mother of a son with autism and an anchor at Univision.
Well,
and
we should say that ACT Today has committed to providing grants in the Coachella Valley,
Yes.
up to $100,000.
Up to $100,000.
It's a huge commitment,
Right.
And we want those grant applications to come in.
Right.
So that's another goal of the workshops and at the conference,
Yes.
to make sure that families have access and everything they need to submit their grant applications and get the funding they need.
And Julie, while I have you here before you go away, sometimes people are a little intimidated when they hear Washington, Sacramento, laws, legislation, and they think, well, and I remember personally being at this point, I'm just trying to help my own child.
Right.
I'm overwhelmed with trying to get my kid services. I'm overwhelmed with trying to get my kid an aid at school. I'm overwhelmed with, getting PT, ABA, speech, all the things we have to do.
Right.
Why is it important for the average person to support lawmakers who support our families?
Well, I would say I would encourage everybody to pay attention to the legislative process in whatever state they live in, because it really is a democratic system. You really do have access to your representatives, and they actually listen. I think I said this on a program earlier that there was a congressman who said that if he hears from 6 constituents who feel the same way on an issue, it might change his vote. And that's why our voices, need to be heard, because we really can make an impression.
I think that's really important. And if you're in the thick of it now with your child, with maybe you recently got a recent diagnosis, you're trying to get those services, something you might think about when you're sort of out of that journey and on to the next stage, is to really start to look at what lawmakers you can support that are going to help our families. Because until we have the clout in the state capitals and in Washington, we will not see laws change. And it was because of all of the families that advocated for insurance coverage, for ABA. Autism Votes, that's another great way. You can go to Autism Votes, and our friend Shelley Hendricks leads that initiative for Autism Speaks. And you can join it, you will get emails, and you can sign petitions. And it only takes a few seconds to sign a petition and hit click, and it'll go to your lawmaker.
Right. And lawmakers really need to know that this is a voting issue, that we're voting for those people who are going to support our access to treatment.
Yeah.
And we're not voting for the people who won't support it.
We won't vote for them. And if they veto autism legislation, we need to get them out of Congress.
Right.
Not vote for those leaders, right?
If we can't talk some sense into them,
they're going.
They got to go.
Right. So, Julie, thanks for joining us. I want you to come back soon. And it's always a pleasure to talk to you and learn from you. I learned so much last week from you, and it truly was one of my bucket list experiences.
Oh,
and
I loved spending time with you. It was a
and
great
I want to go
experience.
back. I want to go back.
We're going back.
Okay, we're going back. All right, we're going to take a short break, and we'll be right back.
Skills is an online program that provides assessment, curriculum, positive behavior support planning for challenging behavior, and progress tracking, and it does this all in one place. The skills assessment and curriculum addresses 8 areas of development, which even includes advanced higher level areas such as executive functions and cognition, which pretty much makes skills the only ABA-based set of curricula for teaching more complex skills, things like problem solving, planning, self-management, perspective taking, and even inferring and predicting others' private events. Skills is a 4-step system. Step 1 is to add the child to your account. Step 2 is to start assessment. The skills assessment is the only ABA-based assessment with psychometric research demonstrating the language subscale to have excellent reliability. Every area of human functioning and typical child development from infancy to adolescence was researched, making the skills assessment the most comprehensive of its kind in the world, and we're quite proud of that.
Skills is easy to use. Simply click Start Assessment and begin answering questions. Or simply type in a keyword, find specific activities to assess, and add activities to treatment. Step 3. Choose activities. Once you've completed the assessment, Skills selects from a pool of 4,000 activities categorized by age, level, and skill type to provide you with exactly those activities each child needs. Start by choosing a curriculum, then a lesson, and finally an activity. Click the information icon to view prerequisites, ages in which targets develop, examples, and IEP goals. Click the video icon to watch a short video. Once you've identified an activity you want to teach, adding activities to treatment is a snap. Step 4. Start treatment. Here you can access customizable activity lesson details, add your own customized targets and exemplars, and edit an activity status such as introducing or mastering it. You can even print handouts such as worksheets, tracking forms, visual aids, and other materials. Skills also offers multiple progress charts mapping curriculum progress, lesson progress, and cumulative number of activities and targets mastered over time. The Skills language curriculum is categorized by verbal behavior type so that users can identify progress for verbal operants, such as echoics, mans, tax, and interverbals.
Skills is one of the only programs that provides the ability to write behavior intervention plans, or BIPs, for challenging behavior.
With just a few clicks, the outline of the behavior intervention plan is written for you and ready to be printed and implemented.
You can learn more about Skills today and get started by visiting us at www.skillsforautism.com, or you can call us at 877-975-4559. Skills. Progress starts here.
Welcome back to Let's Talk Autism, and I am very pleased to introduce our new program assistant at ACT Today, Carla Najara. Okay, say it the right way. Nahera. And as you can see, Carla, and as I said, is fluent in Spanish. Yes. And Carla, you applied for this job, and tell us why you wanted to do this.
I've always liked helping people. My mom has always been very active in her community. She is from El Salvador, so she did a lot of nonprofit work for them, raising money. And I also am familiar, my friend does have a daughter with autism.
Okay.
So, I felt like it was the right job for me, and I really liked it, and I'm very enjoying it.
Well, we are so happy to have you.
Thank you.
I want to let everybody know once again, if you are interested in applying for a grant and you are from a Hispanic family, you are Spanish speaking, Carla is there to answer your questions. You can call her at 818-705-1625. You can go online, look at our application process. If you need any help, that is why we have Carla here to help us. And she's also going to be helping put together our conference in the Coachella Valley. So welcome.
Thank you.
Now it's time to sign off. I can't believe where'd this hour go? Usually Shannon.
By fast.
Yeah, went by fast. So next week Shannon will be back, and hopefully tomorrow she'll be back. Oh, wait a minute. Is there a tomorrow? Okay, there is a tomorrow. She'll be back. Bye, everybody. Thanks for joining us. See you next week.